I'm going to be talking you through a few things that you need to make sure you do or don't do in relation to using knives in the kitchen so that you can keep yourself and everyone around you as safe as possible. There are a range of different knives that we can use in the kitchen, and each has a specific design to make it more or less suitable for different tasks. So it's important to know which knife to use for which job. Using the wrong knife for a particular ingredient increases your chance of injuring yourself because that piece of equipment wasn't designed for that purpose. Looking at the knives here, you can see there's variation in size and the blade type. So the sharp edge on these three knives is the same, and this one's different. This is known as a serrated edge. This knife, with the long blade and the serrated teeth, is actually a bread knife. It's designed specifically to cut up bread products using a sawing method. This next one along, with a thicker blade, but still quite a large knife, is known as a chef's knife. So it's a general all-purpose knife that would be used for cutting up larger ingredients. For example, a bell pepper or an onion. If you wanted to cut it in half, you would probably use a chef's knife. This one here, that's still very, very big, is a long knife but doesn't have as thick a blade as a chef's knife. It's slightly thinner. This is known as a carving knife. So that's designed to cut up meat, to carve meat. And this last one here is probably the one you're going to be using the most in your kitchen. It's a smaller blade. It's still sharp, it's still as sharp as these, but it is a shorter blade, and it's known as a vegetable knife. It's a general all-purpose knife, but it's more suitable for cutting smaller items. So for example, if you've cut your onion in half and you wanted to dice it into small pieces, you'd probably use a vegetable knife to do that. If you were to cut small pieces using a very big knife, then there's a good chance you're going to injure yourself that way. So it's important to think about your knife selection before you start cutting your ingredients. Other types of knives that you may have seen are cutlery knives. So you might find these in your cutlery drawer. This one here that has the blunt and rounded edge, so it's very difficult for you to injure yourself on one like this. This is called a butter knife. So it's designed to spread butter. This one here that has slight serration on its teeth, a bit like the bread knife but on a smaller scale. This is known as a steak knife, so it's designed to be able to carve up meat on your dinner plate. When we hold an ingredient like this with the knife going in between our fingers, this is called a bridge hold and is a safe way of using a knife. You can also use the bridge hold when cutting larger ingredients. So here I've got an onion and I'm using a chef's knife this time because it's a larger ingredient. So again, I create the bridge with my hand, with my left hand in this instance, and then with my right, I cut the onion in half. Whilst we're on this subject, if you are cutting onions, at that point you need to then peel off the papery skin. That's not a pleasant texture. Remember to place the onion flat side down. So if I wanted to slice the onion, first of all I'd get rid of this end bit here, so I'd remove that. I leave the root end intact because that's where most of the fumes come from. So that's the bit that makes your eyes water the most. So if you can leave that on as long as possible, then you're going to spare yourself some watery eyes. So if I was slicing the onion, this is where I move on to the second hold. This is called a claw grip. So I've created a claw with my hand and I'm holding the ingredient like this, and then I'm slicing, making sure that my fingers stay out of the way. So my fingers are holding the ingredient in place and still, in order for me to slice the onion. I pull them back as the knife gets closer to my fingers, making sure that they are kept safely out of the way all the time. So that's how you would safely and accurately slice an onion. But if I wanted to dice an onion, this is how it would look. So I'll chop off the top again, peel off the papery layers of the skin. We don't want that in our food. And this time I want to dice the onion. So instead of slicing this way towards the root, I'm going to slice this way, but quite thick. And you'll notice I'm still managing to keep the root intact. I'm keeping my fingers out the way. I've gone to bridge hold now. So I was at claw grip, now I've gone to bridge hold. Now I'm turning the onion, using claw grip again to dice the other way. And so you've got more square pieces of onion as opposed to slices of onion. You want to make sure that you remove any traces of the papery skin. It's not a nice texture when you get that in your food. Now we need to think about as well how sharp your knife is. Believe it or not, a sharp knife is actually safer to use in the kitchen than a blunt knife. And the reason behind this is that with a blunt knife you need to put a lot more effort behind it. You've got to push and force the knife to make it cut through your ingredients, which increases your chance of having an accident. And if you do have an accident, because you've put that extra force behind the knife, then there's a good chance you're going to cut yourself more severely than if you were using a sharp knife. The other side of this is that if you do happen to have cut yourself whilst cooking, a surgeon will probably tell you it's a lot easier for them to stitch up skin that's been cut using a sharp knife and has created a nice clean cut, compared to a blunt knife that has torn the skin and created a jagged cut. So yes, overall, a sharp knife is easier and safer to use in the kitchen than a blunt knife.
Now it's always best to avoid moving around the kitchen with a knife, but if you do need to move your knife from one work surface to another, it's always advisable to move it within a knife block if you have one. This will make sure that the blade is safely tucked away in case you accidentally dropped it.
Now I need to start thinking about how you keep yourself safe once you're done using the knife and when you clean it up. Now there's a couple of do's and don'ts here. The first one being, don't place the knife directly into the sink or washing up bowl in amongst the other washing. Now the reason behind this is that once you've added hot soapy water, you're inevitably going to have created a layer of bubbles on top of the water, and that layer of bubbles is going to disguise whatever's in the sink. So you could easily injure yourself by placing your hands in the bowl, maybe because you've forgotten the knife is there or just because you can't see where it is. So to avoid this, what you need to do is make sure you put the knife next to the sink and wash them up one at a time. So you're not letting it go in the sink, you're holding it in one hand and cleaning the blade. So now we need to think about how we actually clean and dry the knife. You need to be very aware of which side of your knife is the sharp side. So here you can see the blade is on this side and this is the dull edge. You need to be very conscious of this when you're washing up your knives. You need to pay attention, make sure you're not looking at or chatting to the person next to you. Those kind of distractions and loss of focus is where accidents can happen. Same as when you're using a knife. If you just show it enough respect and concentrate on what you're doing, you won't hurt yourself. So when you're washing up and you have your cloth or your sponge, what you need to do is make sure that the blade is pointing away from your other hand. So here I'm holding the knife by the handle, I might have a sponge or a cloth in this hand, and I'm wiping the blade like that with the sharp side away from my hand so it can't harm me. If I was to wash it up this way round, then I'm going very likely to cut into my palm of my fingers, and that is a nasty injury. So just make sure that when you pick up your knife to actually wash it, you take note of which side is the blade, double check it before you wipe it with a cloth. Exactly the same process with the tea towel. Make sure you're aware which is the sharp side, and with the tea towel in your other hand, wipe away like that.
To recap, make sure you use an appropriate knife for the task, one that's not too small and not too big for the ingredients you're cutting. Ensure that the handle is grease free so that you have the best grip on the knife. Just double check and make sure the knife's still in good condition and there's no chance that the blade is going to come away from the handle. If you have to move the knife around, try and move it within a knife block. Bridge hold and claw grip is the safest way to hold your ingredients whilst you're cutting them. Make sure when you're washing and drying your knives, the blade is away from you. And above all, whenever you are working with knives, ensure that you have got good focus and you're concentrating on the job in hand.
So hopefully now you've got all the knowledge you need to make sure you're working safely with knives in the kitchen. You don't need to be scared of the knives, you just need to show them enough respect and make sure you concentrate and focus when you're using them. That way you shouldn't injure yourself or anyone around you.